All right, guys, I will introduce today's speaker. Today, we have a very, very special person. Tyson co-founded one business that is on track to reach 8 figures. He built an affordable yet effective Japanese school that has enriched the lives of hundreds of foreign professionals. And he manages more than 200 employees and has mastered the magical balance between Japanese and Western business with empathy and humility. He is not only my friend, but my mentor. Everything that I learned is from Tyson. So Tyson, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here and glad to help out.
Awesome. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Got a lot done this week.
Awesome. That's perfect. So Tyson, we always start the show with a quote, and then the quote dictates the theme of the show. Can you please read us your quote?
I have several, but for me, the big one is give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Okay. Can you tell me about this quote?
This is an important, so I think this probably comes from the Bible, but it also relates to business. If you teach your employees how to fish, they'll help you build a successful organization.
All right. And what happens if you don't teach them how to fish?
If you don't teach them how to fish, you're going to have a lot of stress. And what I mean by that is, so if you teach your staff how to do something, they can do it without you having to monitor them. And that will give you time to work on other things. So you can work on scaling your business. But if you don't teach them how to do something, and if you're the only person who can do one thing, your company is going to grow as fast as you grow, meaning it's not going to grow that fast because you have a limited amount of time in the day. And if you're the only one who can do certain things, you're going to have a backlog of tasks, but also your staff is going to have a hard time moving forward because everyone's waiting on you and you'll end up serving as a bottleneck. So if you teach your staff how to do something where you don't need to do it anymore, you can focus on higher level tasks and you can focus on your main goal, which is making sure you have positive cash flow.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So guys, today we're using the format of the hero's journey. We're going to tell Tyson's story from his origins in Hawaii to his current success. Like how did he, get to a point where he's managing a business that's making 8 figures, right? Tyson, let's go all the way back to the beginning. All the way back to the beginning. Can you tell us about your origins?
Okay, sorry, when you said that, I was thinking should I go back to the womb? But I'll say my journey really starts. So I'm born in Hawaii, lived there till I was 18, and I left the second I graduated from high school. And I think my reasons for leaving Hawaii is actually very non-traditional. My reasons for leaving Hawaii were twofold. One, in Hawaii, as an Asian, I was part of the majority. So I went to the mainland because I wanted to experience being a minority. And the second one is I actually wanted to be surrounded by white people.
What is that?
The reason for that was in Hawaii, I watch TV, I see a lot of successful people, and I saw the successful business people, and I came from, I'll say half my family is middle class, half my family is dirt poor. And for example, my family, I was the first person to go to university.
Wow.
Yeah. So in that sense, I got tired of my cousins, family, friends blaming society for their problems. Uh, they're blaming the Japanese for their problems. They're blaming the Caucasians for their problems. And I just got tired of people complaining and not doing anything to help themselves. So that was my second reason. I actually went to the mainland because I really wanted to separate from that environment. And I wanted to meet more people who were trying to solve problems and improve themselves. And it was hard to do that it was hard to do that from a small town in Hawaii,
Perfect. So can you,
where I think maybe less than 10% of people go to a university.
wow, can you tell us a little bit about that transition of, coming from Hawaii and, having this background to then moving to mainland America and being a minority for the first time? How was that?
For me, it was actually a lot of fun.
Okay.
But the challenge at first was now I can speak with a West Coast accent.
Mm.
But when I went to university, I spoke a very solid Hawaiian Pidgin English. So even though I had good SAT scores, I had to learn how to speak normal American English. So that was a tough transition. So it's sometimes people couldn't understand what I said, or they're like, "That's weird the way you said something." I was like, "Oh, really? I didn't know that." And sorry, what was your second question? I think it
Yes.
was like my experience as a minority.
Right.
So it's interesting in the sense that I think maybe I had a good experience, but I think a lot of people thought I was Mexican.
Oh,
They thought I was Latino, so like people were speaking to Spanish to me, asking my recommendations for Mexican food, and it's kind of a cheesy answer, but I actually didn't know it's pronounced quesadilla. I thought it was quesadilla.
right.
So,
It's funny because the same thing happened to me when I moved to the United States. Everyone thought I was Mexican. Same thing, and I'm like, no, I'm from Venezuela. So I feel you, man.
that was kind of funny. I thought it was a pretty funny experience. But the reason I went to the mainland was I wanted to meet people of different cultures, and I wanted to meet, and it was great. I got to meet people from all over the world, and I got to meet people from different economic backgrounds, different levels of intelligence, different areas of study. So for me, it was a really positive experience going to the mainland. And I think the biggest thing was, I would say, I was a big fish in a small pond. And to survive in the bigger pond, I had to reinvent myself. And what I mean by reinvent myself was immediately from the start, I felt the other students were ahead of me. Even though, let's say, I got in my SAT scores at grade level, or my SAT scores matched the school average. But when I went there, like a lot of the Caucasian students and the Asian students as well, they're like moving really fast. So like pretty much my whole life in university was study, study, study because I had to catch up.
All
So
right.
that was a good experience. I think it put me on, or it's let's say I was paying so much money to go to university. Everyone in my family was against me moving to the mainland. And so I wanted to make sure I succeeded.
Gotcha. So you told us you met people from many economic backgrounds, cultures. Was there a particular culture that you know that you felt inspired by?
Not really, but I went to school with people who were celebrities in a way. So some of my classmates had to leave school because they had to go to the World Cup for soccer.
Whoa. All right.
And yeah, I think one of my classmates, she's the best Canadian soccer player who's ever existed.
Amazing.
And my next door neighbor he played in the Olympics. So it's so yeah, it was very humbling.
Mhm.
So it's so like seeing and watching them play, like watch like because I was a soccer player and seeing him play, it was like, oh damn, like I thought I was good, but no, I'm a level 2, he's a level 8. Like I couldn't believe the gap, and that inspired me to work hard. Also, my coworker was one of the actors from Big Bang Theory, the Indian guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Raj. So we worked together in university. He didn't inspire me at the time, but when I found out like 5 years ago, like my friends like, oh, hey, you know that dude we worked with? He's on Big Bang Theory. I was like, oh, yeah, I heard of that show. And I checked online. It's like, oh, there's like the top 5 program in the U.S. I was like, oh my god. So that was so that. But at that time, I don't remember when I found out, but that inspired me too because he was a dork. Like you would never think this dude would be famous, but when I read more about him, like he really worked hard to get where he was, and he wasn't a natural.
Mhm.
Like he worked hard for his success.
Beautiful. Then you came to Japan in 2004. Tell us about that. Why Japan?
I'm half Japanese is the easy answer.
Mhm.
But so I guess my Japan story is I came here in 2004 with a company called Geos. Uh, I transitioned to being an ALT in 2000, end of 2005. And the main reason for that was after teaching for about 2 years, I love teaching and I like to teach people in different ways now. But I realized, I think, at the end of after 2 years in Japan, that I wasn't sure it was the career for me. Then I think for 3 years, like I think, or no, sorry, 2 years after that, I just self-studied Japanese like insane. Like I would work, I would come home and study Japanese for 4 hours. So I was able to get to from N5 to N2 in I think 2 years while working full time. Then to get N1, like let's say, I was in that situation again where I was the big fish, and I think in 2000 like 7 there weren't that many foreign Westerners who could speak a high level of Japanese. So I was kind of the highest level out of pretty much everybody I knew. So I was the big fish in a small pond. Then what I decided to do is I purposely went to an all Korean, Chinese, Japanese language school.
Mhm.
Like I didn't want to study with people from other races, purely because they don't have the language advantages of the Chinese with kanji and the Korean with grammar. And when I went into that situation, like I was at the bottom half of my class. And that again pushed me hard. Like, because some of the people in my class, they pretty much got a perfect score on N1. But to keep up with the Chinese and Korean, I just had to really study Japanese hard. And so I was able to get N1 after 4 years.
Amazing.
In Japan. But I would say probably 3.5 or 3 years of studying.
Right. Do you
So
have any study tips for us?
it's probably, if you check out my site, learnjapanese.bfftokyo.com, it's not a pitch, but I've spent probably 100 hours, so I never have to answer this question again.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'll just say I'll say the story of my life is doing well, becoming the biggest fish of a small pond, then going to a bigger pond, and then pushing myself to catch up with everyone else.
All right. And then you join Interact.
That is correct. So I think my wife moved to Kanto in, she was my girlfriend at the time, but 2010. Yeah, 2010 I believe. So I got N1, but I realized I was doing translation. I hated translation. So I went back to teaching for a year. Then I moved to Kanto. I joined Interact as a full-time substitute teacher, and they hired me full-time after 6 months. The funny story was I was surprised they hired me full-time, but put simply, I asked them later, why did you hire me? And they said, you came to work on time. You never complained about the company. You always put a smile on your face, and you always did very good customer service. So whatever school they sent me to business classes, elementary school, junior high school. They made me teach adults, and whatever situation they put me in, I never complained. Mm-hmm. I just said, and sometimes they would call me in the morning, or I was on call, so I was paid anyways. But they'll call me, you need to do this situation. I'll say, is there any details? They say, we don't know. I was like, don't worry. Focus on your other work. I got it under control. Ooh. And I realized later that, surprisingly, they hired, even though I didn't have management experience, they really respected my attitude. And more importantly, I was someone they wanted to work with. Mm-hmm. So even though there are people who work there 3 years, 4 years, there are head teachers there who are more experienced. They could have jumped into the job much faster than me. Because after they hired me, I was surprised. I have to manage these head teachers. They're way more talented than I am. They're more confident. They've been doing this for 3 years. Everyone respects them. Why do you guys choose me? But I found out later that was the reason. I was someone who was reliable, and I would get the job done, and I wouldn't complain.
Gotcha.
Then I guess my story at Interact, I think people may know Interact. Interact is the second biggest employer of Westerners in Japan. The number one is the Japanese government. So Interact employs about probably 2,500 full-time Westerners as English teachers, and 500 part-timers, I think. But my experience as a manager of Interact set me up for success with OneCoin English. And just to show you how bad it was, the reason is in Interact, probably 30 to 50%, depending on which group you manage. Some groups is 20%, but some groups is 50% of them don't want to be there. Ooh. Especially for junior high school teachers. They don't want to be there. So my first day on the job, I went to squat to pick something from the ground, and a teacher said in a loud voice, he's used to being in that position. Like a sexual reference.
Right.
So my first day on the job, and that's prison level stuff. In prison, they test you. So they tested me from day one because, so there was a pretty high turnover rate when I joined Interact for my place. But when I heard that, I was like, okay, I understand why people quit. Because that is such a rude thing to say. No one would normally say that. But that happened to me on my first day of the job. But so I think the reason Interact really helped me for my current role and my current company, which I founded, is that it was probably one of the hardest management situations I've ever been in. It's way harder than what I'm doing now. Because imagine half of your employees not wanting to be there and having a lot of people resent you because you're from the company. The moment you start, you're the suit. And so because I have to start on such a low point, I actually studied management. I would read HR books, how to be a good manager, how to do communication. I actually studied that for 5 to 10 hours a week, just on my own personal time. I was doing about an hour to 90 minutes of overtime every day. In addition to that, I would read about 1 hour of HR stuff every day. Then I also had, luckily, in my second year, I had a mentor, and I just took him to lunch, went as much as possible, and I just asked him questions like, I had this situation, how would you solve this problem? And I think because I had to manage people who didn't want to be there, and also, let's say, uh, most people were making around 250,000 a month. So I mean, if you manage people who are making 500,000, it's easier in the sense that like, hey, I'm paying you 500,000,
Right.
but it's like you're underpaying me. I don't want to be here. You're the middleman. You're taking my money. I don't need you. And that was the situation I was in. But there's a good story. So I was eventually put in charge of the most important client for Interact. So in the whole nation, I was put in charge of the biggest client. And I was able to turn an employee satisfaction of 2.1 out of 5, which actually matches their Glassdoor reviews. But I was able to turn it around to a 3.8 or 3.7 in 1 year. But the reason for that was, one, I had empathy because I was a teacher. I taught junior high school. I understood their frustrations. Two, I asked them, what were your dissatisfactions with the company? What were your dissatisfactions with meetings? Three, I explained to them what my job actually was and what I had to show my boss. Or like, let's say, I had to show my boss that I was getting this things done. I had to show the client I'm getting this things done. But this area, we have some leeway. So the previous managers, they may have forced you to do these things, these things, these things. But this is what I have to show. This is what you have to show. And let's play around together here. So I think me having a lot of empathy for the teachers, I didn't look down on them. I treated them as an equal. I went out drinking with them all the time. Like the group that I had the hardest time with, I would go out drinking with them, get to know each other, get to see their side of the story, then try to work something out so we can make something better. And long story short, the biggest frustration was people hated coming to the monthly meetings. They had to go there, they're forced to go there. But what I did was I made the meetings useful. Also, the other thing was, even though it was a group of 150 teachers, there were a core group of maybe like 5 to 7 people who were very vocal. And they dominated the group. And actually, a lot of people didn't like them. And how I destroyed their power was I actually came up with the idea with a teaching Olympics. And I made them teach, and they bombed, and everyone lost respect for them. And they stopped being vocal about it because they're a bit, let's say, they weren't collaborative. And because I was able to provide useful meetings and silence the people that were dominating the meetings that weren't contributing and who actually, let's say, made people feel uncomfortable, I was able to turn the satisfaction for Interact's most important client, which I think they still haven't lost to this day. And I think a lot of the things I introduced have still been implemented.
Awesome.
Let Axel decide if I should answer that question or answer it later.
Let's tell your story first, and then we'll go to the Q&A session.
Very good question, by the way.
Would you like to answer it now?
Sure. Can you actually read it for me again?
Sure.
I don't.
Sure, no problem. From William, he says, I have a question. When you were very empathetic, and if that went against management, how do you manage that kind of situation without showing too much disrespect to those that are in power, especially if they are in a position to even fire you?
Gotcha. So in that case, let's say, so to understand my boss, so my boss's needs was, even though he was an idiot, but he had a lot of pride. So one example was when we had meetings with the client, I would tell him in advance, this is probably what they're going to ask you. This is what we've been doing. So when he was asked those questions in the meeting, pam, 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 pam. And would say, because he could answer the client's questions, they thought that he was managing the department well. Even though he was very laid back, he was a salesman. Whatever they wanted, he would just say yes. So my goal with him was, he had a lot of pride. I didn't want him to lose that pride. And when I made him look good to his boss, he was able to show empathy to me.
Mm.
So I had to show empathy to him first before he would show empathy to me. Not sure if that, did I answer his question? William's question?
William? Okay, anyways, let's continue with, the flow of the story, and then we'll continue answering the question. Tyson,
so William, I'll let, please answer the question at the end. And it sounds like a very important question for you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So Tyson, you rose to becoming a manager in Interact, biggest client in Japan, and then you left everything to start OneCoin English from the bottom. Can you please tell us about that transition?
So I actually left Interact without a job.
What do you mean?
It was, I was so confident in my skills that I wasn't worried at all. I don't recommend it for other people. Like, definitely, I don't recommend it. But I was so confident at the time. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go travel for 5 weeks. I'll come back to Japan and I'll figure something out. Mm-hmm. But the reason I quit Interact was I had a lot of success with that group, the Yokohama group, and I think I mentioned earlier, this is what I have to show to the client. This is what I have to show to my boss. This is what I have to show to the teachers. And like with the teachers, this is this area that we can work out together. And after about a year and a half with that main group, I felt that I achieved pretty much all I could within this framework. And anything else that I wanted to do, like I'm a very ambitious person, obviously. Just taking a look at the current company, but I'm very ambitious. But what I mean by ambitious is I care a lot about the employee. I care a lot about the customer, and I want to give them the best. And the situation I was in, I optimized it to a point where I felt like I couldn't really optimize it anymore. And if I were to optimize things, I would have to butt heads with headquarters, butt heads with my boss. And I felt that I would be butting heads so often that it would actually slow my growth. Mm-hmm. And so rather than focus on politics, I felt having a company who would give me opportunities to do give me more control, would help me grow as at the time an HR manager. Cool. So luckily, the moment I announced I was quitting Interact, I got 3 job offers. One was, the timing didn't work out, but I got introduced for a recruiter position at Google when you could only apply by being referred. So I got referred to by one of my employees, but all of the referrals came from employees of mine, which I felt, let's say, I thought people resented me because I'm very strong. If I want something done, I'm gonna get it done. I thought a lot of people resented me, but I felt that was the biggest compliment I could receive. Like, people believed in me so much that they would give me job offers. So like what happened was, when I announced I was quitting Interact, a lot of my employees told their friends, my boss is quitting. Are you looking for someone awesome? And I found out that's why I was getting job offers. So although I talk a big talk here, let's say for me that was the confirmation that more so than the surveys I've done that I was doing a good job. But anyhow, one of those three was to my co-founder at OneCoin English. So the whole OneCoin English thing started because of someone I managed at Interact, whose job I saved, because they wanted me to let him resign, but I said I wanted to keep him for another year and I'll take responsibility. Mm-hmm. But also he more than paid off me saving his job for that time. But so yeah, then he introduced me to the co-founder of OneCoin English, and so I actually had two co-founders for OneCoin English, and the reason I partnered up with them were they're both successful entrepreneurs already. The CEO, one of my co-founders, co-owners, he actually managed $2 million sales company at the time. And he actually manages 3 companies now.
Wow.
Yes, and he's also a consultant for the Ministry of Commerce. Yes. And also, I think that, they're going to bring in a lot of foreigners to Japan. He's on the committee. So, let's say, the story of my life is I've always found mentors to train me, and I figured even if the business doesn't work out, even if I lose money, the education that I'm going to get from working with this guy is going to be worth way more than getting an MBA.
Definitely. So then you started OneCoin English. How was that, starting from zero?
So most people don't know this, but our first location was in Kabukicho. But it was our Shinjuku school. So we started in Kabukicho, and the third co-founder was he managed a low-cost Korean language school. They now have, I think they also have like 8,000 Korean students. They're the biggest Korean language school in Japan at that time, and now as well. They're nationwide now. Before they're just Tokyo, but so I wanted to work with the best, and I started it with them. And how we started it off was we started doing lessons in the Korean language school. And I actually worked for free the first 2 months. Mm-hmm. And so we pretty much started from zero, to be honest. Gotcha. Yeah, so we started from zero, and so I'm trying to be considerate of time, but I'd say we started Kabukicho, didn't help for marketing, but while in the Korean school, we built it up to around, I think, 50 to 60 students. I had an argument with the Korean school owner. I gave the CEO an ultimatum, him or me. He chose me. We paid off the other partner. We're in very good terms now. And we started OneCoin English officially in 2014 August. But in reality, we actually started 2014, I think, January. Right. But yeah, I'll let you ask the next question.
Awesome. So what were some things that you had to learn at this stage in your career?
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So I think less about me learning, I had to unlearn things. Okay. And the reason was I was the manager for the most important client at Interact. Mm-hmm. I turned around that business. And so when we started OneCoin English, my partner says, you got to teach. Mm-hmm. Then I'm like, me? No, why am I going to teach? Mm-hmm. Like, I teach, or let's say, I have managers to manage the teacher, and I just manage the managers. Mm-hmm. Like, teach? Are you crazy? Mm-hmm. And so at first, like, my ego got in the way. Mm-hmm. Like, because of my success previously, I thought I was too good for teaching. uh, but in hindsight, me teaching was probably the best decision I could have made. The reason for that was it helps me. One, it really helped me to understand the students because, as you know, I got to N2 through self-study in about 3 years, working full time. So I actually could not understand anything about the students. Like, what, you study a couple of times a week? Well, you study like 5 hours a week? What? Like, I was studying 20, 25. So by me being a teacher, I got a lot of chances to interact with the students. Why do you come to the school? What are your fears? What is your traumatic experiences in the past learning English? And I really learned about their concerns, their fears, why they didn't succeed in the past, what they want from us. But more importantly, I developed a teaching style while talking to them, asking them for feedback that really helped to ease a lot of those insecurities. And so by putting myself in the classroom, I was able to figure out the right teaching style for our students. And if the CEO, my business partner, co-owner, didn't make me do that, I probably would have just hired a veteran teacher. And I'll watch them a couple of times. I'll be like, okay, you're the veteran teacher. I'm going to be focusing on how to make contracts, the visa system. I'll focus on payroll. I'll focus on recruitment, training. But teaching and, let's say, managing teachers, I'll let you do that. And I think a lot of business owners, they fail because let's say, they don't want to lower themselves enough. Like that, I'm too good for that. Let's say these people should do that. So I think they don't lower themselves enough. And the other one is they hire an expert who they trust completely, but who may not have the same motivations that you do. So by me being, sorry if I'm being redundant, but by me being in the classroom, I was able to find the service we provided.
Perfect.
And that wouldn't have happened if I hired an expert. But more importantly, because of my experience managing a lot, I managed 150 full-timers. It was, I had to develop a teaching style that was easy to understand for people with no teaching experience. So I think, and so I developed it, and I created a leveling system where you learn on a need-to-know basis. And so we're able to train people without teaching experience to understand the concepts of teaching. And because I was able to do that, after we built it to around, probably got 80 to 150, like I was able to pass that to someone else because I solidified the teaching style. Mm-hmm. I also finalized the curriculum, like what book. So we changed book like 2 or 3 times. So I finalized the book. And because I finalized things and I knew why we finalized it, I was able to pass it to someone. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't do it how I wanted it, I could say like, no, actually, you remember as I've written in this, these are guiding principles. You're not following the guiding principles. You need to change. It was able, let's say, that set us up for scaling.
All right.
So even though I think we're I think we're going to enter our 7th year. I think we are at 11 schools. Probably would have been 12 to 13 if it wasn't for Corona and an online school. But I actually thought we would have been like 20, 30 schools by now.
All right. So then the company started to grow. You had 3 schools at that time, and then you transitioned from a player to a manager. So you created systems, then you passed it on to people. What were the things that you had to unlearn and learn at this stage?
Gotcha. Because I came from purely a teaching background, I understood the teacher's point of view, but I didn't understand the Japanese reception staff point of view.
Mhm.
So I actually did Japanese. I did all the trial lessons. I picked up the phone and actually did. I created the initial receptionist system actually. So one thing that helped me with the scaling and dealing with Japanese foreign staff issues was I understood the Japanese staff's job. I understood the foreign staff's job. I understood what they don't understand about each other's job. And I was able to explain it in a way like these are their priorities and to help because of a lack of information and low communication skills, or I personally I think most people have low communication skills, but because of a lack of knowledge and low communication skills, they were unable to connect to see eye to eye. So I had to help bridge that through my knowledge, but also through empathy. The other thing was transitioning up to around 3 schools. Let's say I taught a lot, then I gradually reduced. At around 3 schools, I had to reduce my teaching to 3 hours a week. I'll say most people, one flaw that many people make is they stop teaching because I need to do all this other stuff. But I wanted to do 3 hours a week. The main reason was I wanted the teachers to hear me teach. And I wanted to show them, like, I'm actually the best teacher among you all. So even though I'm training you, so I'm actually, let's say, I walk the walk.
Mhm.
But I think if you don't teach and you just train, which happened in Interact, like I actually didn't teach. Like I was afraid of teaching. I was like, I'm a trainer.
Mhm.
Like I don't want all this pressure
Mhm.
to perform. But because in Interact, I was in a headquarters, I didn't need to go to the schools that often. But with One Coin English, I was with them every day. So I had to be a leader and show them teaching skills and also make sure I still understood teaching. But at the same time, I had to pass the Japanese reception duties to, we hired multiple school managers, but we passed those duties to them. And my job at 3 schools was, I was hiring people, but I just did it based on sense. Like I didn't create a solid format to pass to someone else. Also for the training program, I wrote some basic notes, but I didn't create something which I could pass to someone. And also for management, let's say, because I have a lot of experience, I was able to do it easily, but there was no manual. My philosophy wasn't down on paper. What is our style? So at the 3 schools point, it really was, I passed my teaching duties, passed my reception duties, and I focused on the training system, recruitment system, management system, visa processing system, payroll system. And I had to, because I managed 150 people, I pretty much already could see the next steps of the company. So my goal at that time was, so going from 1 to 3 schools is don't die.
Okay.
It's very simple, like don't die, make money.
Uh-huh.
But from 3 schools onward, it's how can I build the building blocks that's going to set us up for 6 schools, 12 schools, 15 schools, 20 schools. So actually our recruitment system at the moment, it can scale up to 20 schools easily. Our training system as well. Our management system, we have to work on a little bit more, but like a lot of that initial infrastructure I put in there would set us up to scale up to 20 schools, even though we're at 11 at the moment.
Perfect. And then you go to the, how do you say, the business is growing, so you have 7 schools, and in this step you are 4 layers on top.
Yes, so I have a teacher, teacher manager, general manager, me.
All right. And what are the things that you had to learn and unlearn at this stage of 7 schools?
One was, let's say, I guess I'm a little, even though I'm an introvert, I would say I can be charismatic and people trust me because I'm empathetic, I care, and I try to solve those problems. But what happened was people, because I could solve things faster, or the managers couldn't communicate as effectively as me, people would try to come to me. And even though let's say, I wanted to be involved, like, because this company is my baby. I built it up with the original, or with the co-founders, but also the original teachers from scratch. And so I wanted to be involved. But by me answering that question or helping them out, it's actually me showing the manager that I don't trust them. Or it's me showing that I don't believe they can handle the problem. So what I had to unlearn was, I don't need to be the center of attention anymore. Their boss should be the center of attention. And the other thing I did too was, for the manager, the general manager, like, I'm good at making Japanese people laugh. He's good at making Japanese people laugh. But I didn't need to really work with the Japanese staff anymore. So what I unlearned was, or it was easy for me to unlearn, but I actually stopped telling jokes for 1 year because I wanted him to be the go-to guy. If he makes everyone laugh, they build a good relationship, and then work goes smoothly. So I had to set my ego aside to make sure that he was able to put in position. But the good news is, he's now at that layer. Now he's 4 layers up.
Yeah.
And he has great relationship with the Japanese staff. And a lot of it was, the key word here is, a lot of it was by design. So it's so one of the keys for moving to 7 is, you're going to have to hire people who manage people. And although you need to know what they're doing, you can't get in their way. And you shouldn't block their growth for your ego.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. Oh, sorry.
And if you block them, they won't grow, and your company won't grow.
Got it. I have a question regarding hiring, like filtering employees. So at this stage, you have 7 schools, the business is growing. How do you prevent hiring B players or C players who will, bring harm to your company?
I have to give a generic answer because the real answer is kind of a secret.
Oh, okay, sure.
So, but the generic answer is, I would say, I'm not sure if he's listening, but if there's Peter Lackner from Jobs in Japan, he's not here. But anyhow, Peter Lackner from Jobs in Japan has podcasts on hiring. So jobsinjapan.com. They just, and I think altinsider.com. Assistant language teacher, altinsider.com. The founder of Jobs in Japan shares some of his tricks. And but if I were to give my answer, it's develop questions that ask those questions, and don't listen to their answer per se. It's listen to their behavior, if that's a good way of saying it. Meaning, I don't remember the questions we came up with, but it was, you would answer this question, the person would think it's this question, but you're actually asking something else. And based on that answer, you could figure a lot out about their personality. But I would say, so I'm kind of rambling here, but one is, try to find people who are responsible and who can take feedback. So my untraditional approach is, I actually give hard feedback to people during interviews.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, for example, I'll do a role play and I'll say, like, actually your answer sucked. And if they got like, I'm like, okay, this person is someone I'm not interested in working with. The reason is they have an ego, which makes them believe that they're at this level, but they're really this level. It's going to take me time to build them to this level, but if their ego, let's say, if their ego is here,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time it's going to me to train them to get there, it's not worth my time. And more importantly, they're not going to show any gratitude to me. So in my mind, this is a person not worth helping. Because going back to the point when you introduced me, it's being humble. It's always understanding that you could be doing better and that there's always something you could improve on.
All right. Perfect. Perfect.
So I hope that, Angel, do you consider that a satisfactory answer? Because that's a good question that I'm pretty sure multiple listeners also have.
Right. That is definitely a good answer. If possible, I would like a more concrete example.
Okay. So other than, let me try to think. So one example was I would give them direct feedback in the
Right.
interview, criticizing their ability.
Right.
And if they took down notes,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, thank you so much for the feedback,
Right.
I would consider, okay, this person's a little bit below the skill level, but they can reach there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of, I'm always testing people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think of what are some of the other tests. The other test I would do is if I'm hiring for a manager position, I would say like, okay, so you're a manager. Your school, let's say you have 10 teachers. They don't like working there. They feel that the company doesn't listen to their needs. They feel that the Japanese staff is putting too much pressure on them. What is your 6-month plan?
Mm-hmm.
And most people say like, oh, I'll talk to them. I'll help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll listen to their needs. So I'm kind of making fun of them.
Right. Right.
But it's very vague.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was like, okay, so you actually don't know what you're doing. Because a good candidate would say, month 1, I'm going to talk to them pretty much every day. I'm going to take them out to lunch. I'm going to ask them what concerns that were not addressed by their previous manager. Just kind of like diving in there. Week 2, I'm going to explain to them about the goals from the company. And also I want to know more about your goals, and let's try to find alignment. And it'll just be a process 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's how you tell someone who actually knows what they're doing versus thinks that they know what they're doing. But even though I was making fun of them earlier, it's a lot of people who have a lot of sympathy are not very process oriented. So they have good intentions, but they actually don't know what is your 6-month plan?
Right.
And what are you going to do exactly?
Right.
Let's say, in a situation of limited resources and time, what are you going to prioritize? I find that people with a high level of sympathy, they may be good for teaching, but they're not good for management.
Right. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyson. And then we'll go to our last stage, which is your current success. What are some of the things that you had to unlearn and learn at this current stage of your business journey?
Gotcha. So I think around, the 7 schools, I mentioned that I hired a layer 3 person. And so my intention was to train him to do all management for me. So I would never need to do management anymore. He was in charge. So I trained him. He can now handle everything because I trained him very well. But what was happening was I was in charge of all the foreign systems, and we had a person who's in charge of all the Japanese systems. So the Japanese and foreigners employees had different systems. And sorry for burping.
It's all good.
But I made the decision that having two different systems is ineffective. And two, let's say, my Japanese isn't good enough to be a COO of a Japanese company with a multi-million-dollar company.
Really? Even after all those hours of studying?
Oh, I mean, because you got to know finance, let's say, you got to be able to read contracts.
Got it.
So it's like you got to read contracts, you got to negotiate with technology companies, software companies, banks. So, I made the decision to step down. The reason I stepped down was I trained the recruitment team. I had a trainer who I trained, and I had a manager who I trained. So I actually didn't really need to do my job because I trained them so well to do their job. So let's say, but that was the intention eventually. So I built them up for that stage. I was able to just pass it on to the COO. He didn't actually really need to manage much. It's just like, don't worry, I've already pretty much built the system. Just talk to them. Then we decided to make a Japanese language school. And I was the director for that. And let's say I'm the one in charge for that. And the reasons, so Japan Switch, we started that I think in 2018, December. I think we're about 500,000 sales. We could have been 1 million in sales easily, but we're just taking it easy. But so I guess the Japanese school, I think we have 200 students, foreign students. It's not an intensive school, and all the teachers are Japanese. All the reception staff are Japanese, and so I actually had to start from zero again. So it's kind of like the Interact situation again, all over again.
Right.
But in this case, I actually had to learn marketing from zero. So I had to learn marketing from zero. Had to develop the contracts for students, which I didn't need to do previously. So I had to develop the contracts in English. I had to develop the sales process, the marketing process. But anyhow, the school is profitable. Even after Corona, we're still profitable. If you're looking to learn Japanese, japanswitch.com. We have a knack for choosing good names. OneCoin English, Japan Switch. Most schools suck at choosing names, but choosing the right name will set you up for success. But anything I can answer, but I guess the learning point for Japan Switch was as an owner in OneCoin English, even though I liked being in the HR director the position, it gave me a lot of status. I was in charge of over 100 people again. I built it up back to where I was in Interact. I had social, and but I figured that I actually really wanted to learn marketing, and I also wanted to be a CEO. Because when I was an HR director, I really understood HR, understood people, but I didn't understand money. And so I really wanted to learn about how to manage money, learn a little bit about basic accounting, running a business, and marketing. And the reason for that is, as mentioned, like Japan Switch could easily be $1 billion company, very easily. And that's purely through good teaching, but very good marketing. And so with HR, you need time to develop. But if you have money plus good marketing, boom, that's a rocket ship. So I wanted to learn, and if I were to make another business, and so I've always considered making my own business in the future as well, outside of OneCoin English. But and marketing, understanding of accounting and how to run a business would be necessary for that, which could combine with my training, recruitment, and management skills. So by putting myself in zero And like the first 6 months, like some days like I wanted to cry because like I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything about marketing. I'm so used to being an expert, but now I'm a scrub again.
Mhm.
I'm a beginner and I'm getting my butt kicked every day.
Right. Awesome. Before we start our Q&A session, two things I would like to ask you. First is personal responsibility. Why is that important when scaling your business in Japan?
Gotcha. It's the reason personal responsibility is important, and I think I know what you're asking. Uh, so, for example, I had a manager, and he had a problem with his staff. The staff was neurotic. Their complaints were unfounded. It was driving the manager crazy. And the manager was complaining to me, but I told him I understand that she's neurotic. Let's say that's something that's out of your control, but the reason that you're not, let's say she's responsible as well, but she's not, a person who's neurotic is not in a state where they can take responsibility because they're just selfish. They don't have that, let's say, they don't have empathy for others. Not saying they're a bad person, just saying they don't have empathy because they're so focused on their own needs. But because that person was neurotic and driving him crazy, he also stopped developing empathy for that person. And in his mind, it's 100% her fault. In her mind, it's 100% his fault. Then in my mind, it's like, you're both idiots. You're both responsible. One is you're neurotic. Also, you need to improve your management skills. So why I think responsibility is important is if you believe someone else is 100% responsible, there is no room for improvement. Mm-hmm. You have essentially closed the door on growth. Mm-hmm. So even though the other person is responsible, let's say I went to a bad part of town and I got robbed. In my mind, I'm actually 50% responsible because I knew that I shouldn't go there. Even though in reality, it's that person's fault. In reality, it's 100% that person's fault. I could have prevented that situation, so that's my responsibility. So I find that people who are not 100% responsible, meaning like whatever situation you're in, you take some, and what I'm saying, I'm not saying that you should take 100% responsibility, but every situation you find yourself in a problem, if you take some percentage of responsibility, you'll look for a solution. And I think people who take responsibility may not be empathetic, but in a way, they are creating a situation that creates empathy. And I think a lot of societal problems is caused by people not taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let me ask you something. How can we inspire people to take more personal responsibility where we live in a world where people, or most people, blame external factors for their problems? You know, it's not me, it's the government, it's the media, is this and that, or my boss or my girlfriend or whatever. How can we inspire people to take personal responsibility when it's so easy to just blame something else?
I think the easiest way for most people is to change your immediate environment. And what I mean by that is changing your job might be hard, but changing your friends. If you're surrounded by friends or family who don't take responsibility, then they're going to hold you back. But if you surround yourself with people who take responsibility, people who are empathetic, it will allow you to grow as a person. So what I'm trying to say is you don't have control over society. You don't have control over the media other than turning off your TV. Mm-hmm. But you do have control of your friends. You don't have control of your family, but you can't avoid your family. Mm-hmm. But I actually avoided contact with my family for 5 years because let's say I would say something, my mom wouldn't respect what I said. She would be passive aggressive, and I told her, if you're going to be passive aggressive with me, and I'm sharing my feelings with you, and you're not, let's say you're not an active listener, and because of that, I don't want to interact with you. So I actually had to train my mom how to become an active listener. But that comes from responsibility again, because I felt, okay, my conversations ain't going good with my mom. She's a bit of a narcissist. I don't think she's going to improve. She has no desire to improve. What can I do? Okay, I can avoid contact. And that taught her a good lesson that, let's say, if you want to interact with me, you have to treat me as an equal.
Wow. And did it work? Cutting contact with your family for 5 years, did that work?
It worked very well.
Wow.
So whenever my mom tries to do it again, I'm like, hey, you're being passive aggressive. Like, I don't tolerate that.
Right.
You can be aggressive with me, but don't be passive aggressive. Because that's manipulative. So to answer your question, there are things you don't have control over, and there are things you have control over. Start with the easy ones first, your friends. So I'm very selective of my friends. And in my case, I actually have few friends, but I have a lot of mentees.
Gotcha.
Probably have like 5 to 10 mentees at all times. So I think you are a graduate of that program. But I'm very selective of my friends. The reason for that is I'm a very empathetic person, and it's a curse and a blessing. But let's say if a person's feeling pain, I really feel their pain. So I have to be very careful who I surround myself with, because let's say it's going to affect my psyche. So the good news is I can help people a lot because I can understand what they cannot communicate. But on the other end, let's say I'm very overly sensitive. So I have to be very careful of who I surround myself with.
Exactly. It's like a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword.
Understood. Tyson, yeah, that was a very awesome answer. Thank you. And before we go to the Q&A session, I want to talk a little bit about the shadow and integrating your shadow, because, and this is for everyone, I have seen many business events, they talk about startups, scaling your business, how to, attract Japanese clients, and so on and so on and so on. But we believe that to scale your business, you have to scale yourself as a person. It's really important to, improve yourself. Tyson, what is this concept of the shadow?
The concept of shadow is simply everyone has an unconscious part of themselves which they have not processed, and that part of yourself that you've not processed affects the actions that you make today. So for example, let's say the common one today is like, this person's triggered. And usually when they use the term triggered, it means unprocessed part of their past has taken over them, and let's say they're very emotional at the moment. I think that's probably the most relatable example. Or like I'm trying to think of, sorry, I don't have a good concrete answer at this moment that I feel satisfactory.
Okay, awesome. What are some ways that we can work on our shadows?
A good way to work on your shadow is, so for example, if you're feeling angry, you ask yourself, who's feeling angry? And it's like, what's your name? So for example, in my case, like Like I had a part of myself, like I'll call him, let's say his name is Jim.
Mm-hmm.
He's 10 years old and he hates his narcissistic mother. Then it's they have various ways of doing it, but you'll just say like what year is it? Oh, I think it's 1980. And it's like, actually, it's the year 2020 right now.
Right.
And that's how you find out what parts of your psyche is trapped in the past. And if you're able to ask, who are you? What year is it? That'll help a little bit. I won't go too deep into it because, let's say, you will experience the most emotional pain you've ever experienced in your life if you try to face your shadow. That's why people don't face their shadow, because it's so scary. You can look more into Carl Jung, or Jung, sorry, with a J. But in terms of scaling, it's by working on my shadow, I'm in the present moment. And because I'm in the present moment, I can actively listen to a person. You are 100% with that person.
Mm.
But if, for example, you've having a conversation and the person's waiting for their turn, that person is not in a clear state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say their intellectual side has taken over them. And so a lot of the communication issues that people have is just egos talking to one another.
Right. Right. Shadows talking to one another.
Exactly.
Right.
So one reason when I manage people or with my close friends, if one of their egos is talking to me, I'll actually point it out. I'm like, actually, that's your intellectual part. But what do you think? And people actually give you different opinions. But it's because, let's say I'm not a guru or anything like that, but because a lot of times I'm in a clear state of mind, and if I really care about you, I will call you out on it and just point it out and notice that, okay, actually, your shadow has taken you over at this moment. And because I've done that, that actually helped me in a lot of situations in business. Like, for example, I told you about my boss in Interact. Like, I have to think, like, because normally a person would just be like, oh, he's a dick, he's an asshole.
Mm.
And let's say he doesn't care about me. But I just like, oh, yeah, I wonder what's his pain point? What's his fear? Oh, so his shadow is feelings of insecurity. And when you point it out, he gets angry.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I put him in a situation where he doesn't have to feel that?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we're going a bit. It's it may seem esoteric. It's actually not, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's. I think I'm kind of unique as an entrepreneur because even if we hit 8 figures, even if we make $100 million company, like I would be more proud of the fact that I've dealt with my shadow
Mm-hmm.
than making $100 million, because more people make $100 million or build companies that big than deal with their shadow.
Got it.
It's that hard. It's harder than making $10 million or company.
Right. Is it possible to work on your shadow and at the same time work on your business? Or do you have to like take a break and work on your shadow? What is your recommendation?
I would recommend you don't do it simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is if you're running a business, you're sometimes in a survival state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a survival state of mind, your shadow is going to take over you for survival. Because that's what the shadow is there for, it's to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend putting yourself in a stable situation, work with your shadow, then start a company. You can start a company, but I think, let's say, your growth will be much slower.
All right. Awesome. That is perfect. And I think we are ready to start
Yes.
our Q&A session.
So yes, definitely get to your questions.
All right. But before that, Tyson, The last thing. What is the change that you would like to see in the world?
So I think one of the things you learn when, so, sorry, I'm laughing because like the way I started that sentence, like, oh God, damn, there's gonna be a story. When you manage a big company, you have to choose things. There's money, there's people, there's things, there's limited resources. And to be a successful manager at the higher levels, you have to choose the one thing that solves all the other problems. So for example, in most companies, people say like, give me more money, give me more money. That's often never the root cause. So for me, the root cause that will solve a lot of issues is people taking responsibility, more responsibility. So whatever situation you're in, take a percentage of responsibility. And for example, like watching your health, if you're overweight, let's say you need to be more cautious, or you need to love your body more, because that's disrespectful to your body. Let's say you don't need that much inflammation. So I got distracted there.
Okay.
What was the question again? Sorry.
The change you would like to see in the world.
Gotcha, yeah. So I think if people were to take more responsibility for their actions, they would stop seeing other people as enemies. And they would be taking more action on their own to solve the problem. And people who can solve their problems help other people solve their problems. And the more people who stop running away from problems and actually try to solve the root causes of problems will solve a lot of these problems naturally. So a lot of times people want the government to solve everything for us. But a lot of times as a politician, your goal is just to stay in office. And a lot of times you can't get things you want done. There's a lot of things I want to do in my company, but everyone else has things they want to do. So you have to compromise. But at a smaller scale, in your individual scale, all these little, let's say, all these little problems you solve, it will add up. And you would raise the quality of your life. And what I mean by that is, I feel that people who just blame other people, I kind of feel they're in hell, in a sense, like not a metaphysical hell, but an actual mental hell. So I actually think hell is not a metaphysical place, but it's a place in your mind. And a lot of it is self-created. And the only way you can solve that is by taking responsibility. And what I mean by that is, I feel that the minute you blame someone else, you are not an independent person anymore. Like you give away your free will. So the minute you give or let's say once it's someone else's fault 100%, let's say you have no control. But if you take 20%, you still have control of the situation. And if you have control, there's a possibility to solve that problem. So to bring it all back, it's solving the root cause. The key to be a successful business person is always solving the root cause, which solves everything else. Because if you're trying to fight all these small battles, you're going to be not wasting, but you're going to be using a lot of time, energy, resources to solve things that have little impact. But for example, when I do marketing, I have a list of 100 tasks, and all of them is how easy is this and what is the impact? Let's say if it has no impact, it's 1. If it has a lot of impact, 5. If it's very easy, it's 5. If it's very hard, it's 1. Then I look at the scores. Okay, this is high impact, and I can do this in 1 hour. This is what I should do. And it's finding the one thing that has the biggest impact. That's also easy. So changing society is hard, but focusing on what you can do for yourself is actually a level 1 ease, even though people make it seem like level 5. Sorry, I laughed. It's actually not funny. It's actually very tragic. So I shouldn't be laughing, but that's kind of the That's the shadow in me that's a little bit not sinister, but let's say is the vengeful side of me is kind of laughing. But so I apologize for laughing.
No worries. Thank you, Tyson. That was an amazing answer. Let us go to our Q&A session. I know William asked you a question and then a follow-up question. So William, you have the floor. We have entered our Q&A session, guys. So please type your questions on the chat. If you want to ask your question directly to Tyson, just write it down so that everyone can see it, and I'm gonna call you. If you don't want to appear on the recording of the show, please send it to me privately, and then I'm gonna ask Tyson. So William, all yours.
Thank you. That was incredibly, it was a very remarkable conversation to be in. And before I kind of get into a commentary, I wanted to, partially because I feel like I very much understand the language that you're using, because I've been in incredibly similar situations, dealing with people that are behaving narcissistically, making my own judgments, facing my shadow, and so on and so forth. And I was curious, because I felt that, especially from hearing what you had said, but also through my own experience, I had to really develop this empathic muscle within me in order to deal with these seemingly impossible situations. And in particular, I was actually, I felt that I had to develop this because I was noticing an alarming trend in corporate culture of psychopathic behavior being rewarded. Meaning the guy that can backstab the most, the guy that can cheat the most, and so on and so forth, tends to win, and no one can. It's not really about punishing. It's more about, like, how can we take that power back from us, take the power back that he had somehow, or he or she had somehow managed to manipulate into getting. And what I learned was that it was really a matter of drawing boundaries, and also, as you said, taking responsibility, meaning, well, there's a part of me that's actually allowing this to happen. And in order for me to resolve that was to use empathy. And I'm very curious as to your your thoughts and opinions about these kinds of situations where it seems like, you're approaching someone, and it's like, any kind of criticism that you make on them will be used against you. Any kind of behavior that you're trying to use to help them is taken as an aggression, because they perceive you as better than them. And if you said, I'm going to back away from this, because you're trying to draw a boundary, they accuse you for being passive aggressive, even though it's actually, they're just projecting onto you, and so on and so forth. I'm very curious about how you've dealt with these kinds of situations, because I feel like for most people, it's so stressful, and they just never want to face it. But that's part of them ignoring their shadow. I think it's, to not acknowledging that there are people out there that are criminals. There are people out there that behave psychopathically, narcissistically, and so on and so forth. I'm very curious about how you deal with these kinds of situations, because I've noticed that I've encountered too many of these kinds of people. And to me, it's like, I don't think it's really about the person. I think it's about their behavior and what's motivating that behavior. And it seems like what's motivating the behavior is something that's affecting groups of people and it's a systematic issue. And I don't want to really blame these people. I think it's a system that's causing them to behave in this way, because that's been rewarded traditionally. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'll try my best, and I think you'll have to ask a follow-up question, because I think there was 4 questions there.
Yes, thank you for, yeah.
The first one was, so I've actually have a mentor who's worked in the $1 billion scale of things. And kind of the conclusion I've come to is that probably, to be honest, around the $10 million value, like, sales per year, you start to reach a point where there's so much at the win or lose. There's so much at stake. I'm not sure for your company, but in some companies, if you succeed, like you are taken care of for life. Like you get, let's say, you get company stocks, you get the incentives, and you're taken care of for life. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that the stakes are so high, and people hate themselves. They hate the situation they're in, but they hate the situation they're in so much that they're willing to tolerate it and shit on others just so they can get that freedom if they survive. Not, okay, physically, but metaphorically survive in that environment. So to be honest, my opinion may change, but I'm kind of the opinion that with government and also corporations at that scale, it's kind of unavoidable because you're getting freedom from, I would say, toil. I don't know if there's a better word for toil, but you're getting freedom for it, and because that's so valuable, it'll naturally happen that way. So I'm not sure if it's natural, but I'm not. That's kind of the conclusion I've come to for that. Yeah, I think the situation, like, yeah, pretty much whatever you do, they're going to try to use it against you, or like, let's say, teams of people will try to annihilate you so they can get a promotion. And to be honest, in that corporate level, I think it's kind of, based on what I've heard, which is very narrow, it seems to be unavoidable at that, let's say, the 4-layer tier, the 5-level tier. At the second, third level tier, the stakes aren't high enough where people becomes a doggy dog to destroy each other. You had a couple other questions. I think there's other questions, but I'll let you answer one more question. I'll get it, then we can get to the other people.
Yeah. I guess it's, what you just explained, it actually sounds like I'm not sure if you studied business or economics, but it seems like what you're talking about, it's more of like, it's a behavior that's noticeable, especially as you're sort of, you're basically climbing up the ladder. And eventually, as you get closer to the top, it seems like it becomes more of like an oligopoly, meaning that you have like 2 or 3 players. And then what happens is when it becomes a monopoly, then that's when it's like, there's no one that can challenge you. And unless the entire system comes down, no one can really take you out. And to me, it seems that like that's the so-called freedom, meaning like I can just do whatever I want because this is my game. I'm just playing my game. And then that, there's like the rules don't even apply to you at that point. You're a multi-billionaire. You can buy out the cops, the politicians. It doesn't really matter anymore. And then I feel like that at that point, it's like, well, do you behave psychopathically, or are you willing to lose, all of your everything because you're trying to do the right thing? And I think that's where the challenge is because unfortunately, I think a lot of people tend to value their freedom more than trying to do the social good or whatever. But I mean,
I'm not sure if this will help, but how I've processed it was because of the scale of my company. Like I did a deep dive and thought, like, if I lived 200 years ago, I would have to worry about someone stabbing me in the back with a knife. So I thought actually, and what I mean by that was, nowadays it's there are some extreme cases where they might try to get someone imprisoned, but the stakes of the game now, we've created it to be so serious. 200 years ago, it was dead serious. So that has helped me process it as well, or not take it so seriously. That I would say they're not going to kill me over it, which would have happened 200 years ago. That's one. And the other one, I think, was a fair question on how to handle it. I think because I was probably 1 layer below that in Interact, I didn't have to face those battles. But I think the big one is realizing that it's a game and that the other people don't realize it's a game. And they actually think it's life or death. And by realizing it's a game, you are actually the only one who's free. Because they think if they get this money, they're going to win. They'll buy their freedom. But the person who realizes it's a game is a true winner of the game. And that's
Yeah, because you can, I mean, some of what you were talking about, it sounded very much like what Jordan Peterson was saying, you know.
He got it from Alan Watts,
Oh,
a
did he? Okay, interesting. Yeah.
British philosopher. But I'll check out Alan Watts
Yeah,
and listen
I've
to
listened
his.
to this stuff. Yeah.
I'll get it.
But I agree. I think it's more of like, you know, can you enter into that play mindset, realizing that it is just a game that we're all playing, and you know, you can behave in many ways. And this is part of the reason why, you know, and I'm not trying to correct you, but it was like I what I realized is that I got caught in this cycle of labeling people, saying like, oh, he's a narcissist, or he, you know, or I'm an empath or something. I realized that that was totally not even right. It's like they're acting narcissistically, they have an empathic side, but you know, and then if I can get out of that judgment, then I can kind of remove myself and take responsibility, being like, oh well, there might be something in me that's causing this person to act narcissistically, and it's because I'm actually acting narcissistically. How can I, and it, you know, it goes into what you were saying earlier, it's like, how can I show empathy so that this person can show me empathy back? And that's the sort of shadow side. It's like, what am I doing wrong, you know, causing this person to act in a way that's harmful to me or even themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. And the way you phrase that question, that's one of the way you deal with the shadow. It's not this person's a narcissist, their behavior is narcissistic.
Right.
And and if you see their behavior as narcissistic, you see them as if you have a better word, you can say it, but you see them as an entire being, meaning they are a complex being. But if you see them as a narcissist, you see them as a simple one-dimensional creature, when actually they are a very complex creature who behaves differently in different situations.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really I think it's getting trapped in your projection of their ego versus really seeing them for the soul that they are, and the multidimensional reality of, you know, each of our souls as well, because, you know, we're in that sense, we're all very similar, right? We can I've acted narcissistically, you know, I can show empathy. I've seen narcissists, but you know, they'll cry when, you know, something happens or whatever, and it's not that they're, you know.
They're not a narcissist all the time. And the quote that I didn't say was, I've created this quote myself, so I'm a little bit proud of it. But it's everyone, or you're an asshole, I'm an asshole, everyone's an asshole. The question is, to what degree and how often?
I also like to say everyone's got an asshole, so you better get used to it. Thank you.
That's a good one too.
All right, William, thank you so much. That was a very nice question. Let's go to Harmut.
Okay, hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for
Thank you
coming.
for having me. And thank you for this nice presentation, Tyson. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly clear.
Okay, good. I'm joining from Germany, close to Munich, so I'm glad that I can be part of this today. And although I'm far away, I'm with you today. I have a question. When I read the description and when I listened to what you said, and you were referring to corporations, bigger or smaller sizes, and I've worked in mostly large corporations, and I've always been I always found it fascinating to think about leadership and management. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, I was wondering, when you're an entrepreneur, you basically have to do everything. You have to be able to do everything. You do everything from marketing and product definition and customer segmentation and sales and finance, and you name it. And when that comes into play, you're basically dealing with management skills. On the other hand, when you want to run a good company and when you run a successful company, you're dealing with leadership, like leading people. What's your thought or direction? If I'm an entrepreneur, is it leadership, people, or management? So what's your take? Thank you.
Very good question. I would say during Corona, people need a leader. Meaning, so during Corona, everyone's afraid of losing their job. Their friends are losing their job. People are losing their wealth. And in this situation, you need a leader who is not breaking down under the pressure. So for example, like I'm a pilot, let's say there's some turbulence. If I freak out, everybody's gonna freak out. So in terms of Corona, it's understanding that everyone's afraid and scared, and but also spending, like, I'm scared myself, but spending enough time to not focus so much on the fear, but how I'm going to stir everyone how to get out of there, but more importantly, communicate that we're going to get out of there to them. And the reason for that is once people start to panic, it's like the coronavirus, very infectious, and just infect more and more people. So fear is contagious, and so you have to be a leader in that situation. In terms of being a manager, I would say that's more important when you've developed a good system, a good structure, and you want to prevent entropy from happening. You need to be a good manager. So let's say, for example, you have a very good company culture. How do you maintain that? And that's being a good manager. So I guess to sum it up, sometimes being an excellent leader, it's being empathetic, but you also have to be very direct to people. For example, if I have a staff who is panicking, I'll say, please stop panicking. Because when you panic, all your employees get nervous and get afraid. They're considering finding a new job. And it's not because their job is in danger. It's because you can't handle the fear of the situation. So you need to take responsibility for that. So a manager might be more diplomatic, but sometimes being a leader is saying, like, we're in a crisis. I'm in a battle. If you're a liability, I'll have to get rid of you because you're going to hurt everyone else. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, in part, yes. I mean, of course, you can scale this to countries. If you have a good leader, countries doing well. If you don't, there's countries who show this nowadays. When you're referring this to COVID-19, of course, I didn't think of that. But sure, my question was a little bit more towards small companies, entrepreneurs need leaders or managers, large corporations, leaders or managers. Maybe it's not that easy to say. Big ones need managers, small ones need leaders.
I would say for if you're starting a new business, definitely a leader. And what I mean by that was, for example, when I first started both companies, there's nothing at all. People are nervous if we can make this business work. And so rather than developing kind of like the management system or kind of like micromanaging them, it's more, my focus was being a leader, saying like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to achieve. And it's kind of, leader is kind of selling the vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my vision is more on selling the vision, selling the dream, as opposed to, let's say, the manager meaning, let me help you grow, let me help you develop, let me train you in the skills. And I think so you serve as a leader, let's say, I guess be charismatic, be confident, let's say, because people are like, let's say, when you're starting a company, you can't pay as high salaries as other companies. You may have to give them stocks. So let's say, if you're a very good leader, people are willing to jump into your small boat to enter the ocean. But if you're a good manager, and it's like, would you jump in that boat into the storm?
Yeah, right. So while the good manager has a good working system, you don't want to rely on that system only if there's no vision to follow, no direction really.
Yeah.
No bigger vision. Yeah, thank you.
But there comes a point when you sell the vision, and there comes a point when you're going to have to deliver on that promise. And that's when you need the manager.
But that's when you need the people who can make it happen, right? You can't make the vision happen by yourself. That's why you should have been a good leader already to have led the people so that they can follow and make your vision come true.
That also applies as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm pretty sure you knew the answer already, but hope it helped.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the question. That was amazing. I guess, does anyone have any other questions? I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds.
If you don't mind, I just want to follow up on that question
Go ahead.
with the leader and the management issue. So I think, I mean, some managers can also be excellent leaders, but I've noticed usually I like there's a picture that I saw, and it was about like the difference between a leader and a boss. And I think a boss is very much like a manager position. And from my perspective, it seems like the leader is the one that's standing in front and saying, I have the vision, this is what I'm seeing, and they're able to communicate that effectively to their entire team, including the manager. The manager is paying attention to the leader's basically his unconscious, his backside. He's watching out for it, and you can use the wolf pack analogy of the alpha and the omega and the beta, and because they all serve different roles, right? And I'm very curious as to how, as a in order to be an effective leader, the kind of communication that you have to engage in with the manager without threat, with showing respect to them, but simultaneously like being able to criticize them that their management is failing, at least in the current situation or something. It might have worked in the past, but you have to change and so on and so forth. Like, because I think it's about rapport. Like, you have to build this relationship. It's not something that is just given for granted, especially because the situations change. And do you think it's just about communication, or is there more to it for both? For both, meaning the qualities in a leader as well as qualities in a manager.
From personal experience, I think the manager can never truly what it means to be a leader who is purely in charge of navigating the whole ship. What I mean by that, all right, I'll go into more detail. But on the other end, the leader has to be empathetic to the manager because the manager is dealing with the day-to-day. The manager is really dealing with people's emotions. And because the manager is dealing with people's emotions, the leader, a good leader, has time to think about what direction to steer the ship. So a good leader would thank the manager for, let's say, absorbing all that emotional energy, which frees up the leader to have more mental energy to think about where to navigate.
It's very interesting because it to me it's like it's very much like a it's almost like a brain function thing, right? It's like different parts of the brain operate differently, and it's like whoever has the strongest prefrontal cortex is the leader. Whoever has a much more developed like limbic system, like an emotional brain, it's like he's paying attention to how everyone's feeling. It's like everyone's the leader's like, let's go in this storm, and everyone's like, I do not want to go there, and then the bot, basically the manager is like the one that can basically tell that leader, it's like, hey man, like you are about to kill everyone. I know you're the leader, but you got to sort of back down here. And, and then it depends on the, that's going to probably trigger the leader, obviously, but, yeah, it's very interesting how you're phrasing it from it's because it's, and it's also about like group psychology, right? Like how the group is able to synergize with each other because everyone plays a role in this. And I think it's much, I feel like just from like a modern day perspective, that kind of organizational structure, I feel like it was much more prevalent and easy to see in the past when you had armies, on a boat or something, and, you had the captain and, everyone's roles were assigned. But now we're living in a corporate system. Everyone's in a block and no one can really see what's going on inside of everyone's computers. And so the roles are somewhat clear, but it's not like, it's not like HR managers always wearing like a red shirt or something. I mean, you can't really see, how the interplay of these different elements are going on. And I'm kind of curious actually, like, what do you think some of the unique challenges are in this digital age right now? Corporate, it's almost like post-corporate culture now, because we're having to synergize on the internet whilst taking into consideration the current needs of our environment, our cultures, our companies and so on, and our communities. Whilst it's kind of like, I feel like we're almost like abandoning society as like a ship. figuratively speaking, because we're having to change so rapidly and we have to get rid of a lot of rules.
So I think you brought up a very good point about let's say the feelings, the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex versus analytical processing information. And I think one of the big problems that technology has created is that the limbic system is not financially scalable, meaning it's very good for one-to-one interactions. I feel your emotions, I adjust. But if you're going to create something that goes to 100 million, it's really all about the prefrontal cortex, like process, structure, logic, analysis. And I think that's the challenge I see, that people who are very caring, or I'll say sympathetic, let's say they have if you want to be technical, they have a very active limbic system, is a lot of them feel disgruntled and unappreciated because they invest so much mental energy to help people, but maybe there's the amount of salaries they receive. They don't, let's say like a waiter. Like a waiter actually does a really good job. Like I go there, I have a good time, I feel good. They've actually done a very important job. And they use a lot of mental energy to achieve that. But from an economic standpoint, that's not scalable. And because it's not scalable, you only get this amount of money, as opposed to someone who can just say like, okay, I guess I could use the marketing example because that's something that's scalable, or someone who's a programmer. They could just write the right code, they sell it, or let's say they can make tons of money just because it's scalable, well as, let's say, the empathy part. Of course, there's elements where they coincide, but when you see people who are frustrated with society, it's usually people who have a very active, or they're very sympathetic and caring, is my experience. But I don't know how to break that divide, and that's something I sometimes think about, because I do have friends who are world-class scalers, and they can just they could create $1 million very easily just by producing something, because they're just very focused, very analytical, very process structured. Where I have another friends where they can barely, let's say, make enough to survive, but they're very caring, they're very supportive people, and they're just trying to stay afloat. And I don't think there's been, so I don't know the answer on how to solve that divide, because economics values scale.
Well, I feel like, the success, though, in a long run perspective, like I'm going to take something like Bitcoin as an example, just because it's the easiest example to come up with in terms of money and scalability. It's, Bitcoin it was developed probably by someone that's working in finance and, and in the computer programming, basically, right? So, and it's like, okay, yeah, this works from a functional perspective, but it's incredibly unsafe, meaning that like there's no accountability, everyone's anonymous on this network, and like we have no, at least now, way to figure out where this money is coming from or going, right? And as a result, at the end of the day, like I think it's called limbic resonance, meaning like I feel safe because you feel safe. And I think that's when it's like, oh, I'm feeling you, and it's like, and so basically if I'm in my head, meaning I'm in my prefrontal cortex and I'm like analyzing the situation, meaning like right now I might be like, oh, am I talking too much right now? It's like, I'm just going to cut off myself. But if there's a part of me that's like, I think it's safe for me to voice my opinion right now. And if you're feeling the same way, it's like, oh, I think it's okay, actually. Like, then, I feel like it's not the divide. I think it's more of like it's like you're connecting the two, actually. It's using your logic to understand the emotions, and you allowing the emotions to help guide higher orders of thinking, meaning, well, yeah, if I sell my company, I'll make $100 million, but I might have to, kill my partner or something, just because that's the only way that I'll get, 51% stock or whatever. You're going to have conflict there, and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense, even though I can potentially do that. It might make logical sense, but just doesn't, from a limbic perspective, it's like, well, I don't want to do that, right? So I think it's really about actually helping communicate those two parts, the emotional side and the logical side, and then coming up with a higher solution to say what really makes sense logically as well as emotionally. I don't think it has to be black and white.
I think a lot of the great inventions combine that element where they've had to talk to people, they see people's suffering point, where they have and they want to do something better. So I don't see it as black, or I describe it as black and white, but I don't see it as purely black and white, but I do see that, let's say, it is kind of leaning towards that direction. Although I think the ideal system is the combination of both. And actually, that's if I were a manager, that's actually the conversation I'll be having with people. I'll be like, your sympathy is amazing. I love it, but you have to be a more dynamic person. You can't just be this one way. The reason for that is you're going to put your whole heart into things. It's not actually going to be, let's say, a lot of times it's not actually that helpful. But if you combine both the logic and the heart, you can create something that's much better, and that will take you to where you want to go. But if you continue in this path, you're going to be continually disappointed. You're not going to be considered for promotions, pay raises, because you're too focused on this one area.
That makes
All right, guys. So let's, stop it here. The conversation is amazing. It's full of insights. However, we went overboard with time, and Tyson, I want to thank you for coming to this event and providing all these insightful, these insights were amazing. Thank you so much.
Cool. Glad to have helped, and I thought it was a good discussion.
Yeah, that was amazing. And Tyson, where can people find you? Where can they contact you?
Gotcha. So I guess if you're looking for Japanese lessons, or any of your friends are looking for Japanese lessons, japanswitch.com. I guess it's just my name or my email, or you can find me on LinkedIn actually.
Mm-hmm.
Just TYS. I think it's on the presentation, or I think it's on the LinkedIn page and Facebook page, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks so much.
Cool. Take it easy, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Okay. Thanks so much. Have a good night.